Life and Growth by Matija Barović. The starting points for the project were death and sustainability, both environmental and social. Through my research, I looked into common burial methods and their green alternatives, where I found human composting or recomposition to be the most interesting. I inquired into the funeral industry and funeral poverty. I found that funeral costs are rising at such a rate that the government has launched an investigation into the issue. To get a spiritual perspective and learn more about rituals and ceremonies, I researched practices most common for religions in the UK, Native American beliefs, and interesting customs from around the world. This is where I started thinking about modesty, merit, legacy, celebration, and perspective. Native American beliefs inspired me to think about humans as part of the circle of life and the ancestral line. They also emphasize community, generational wisdom, and storytelling in their rituals. I started thinking about ways to shift perspectives around death by using nature, ancestry, and shared heritage as reference points. I looked into nature preservation efforts and existing infrastructure. To get insights into loss, I inquired into grief, mourning, and personal experiences with death. For more in-depth knowledge, I interviewed the chair of End of Life Doula UK, Lizzie Neville, and talked about what people struggle with and ways they heal from grief. This led me to look into mindfulness, sensory experiences, nature as therapy, and unconventional grief support groups, such as walking groups for the bereaved. The project gradually grew from how might we get more people to opt for sustainable burial methods and how might we make burials more accessible to the underprivileged, to what could be the preferable future of death, and how might we create a system that provides an accessible, dignified, personalized, and therapeutic experience to the users while aiding nature preservation and climate mitigation efforts. The outcome imagines a new death service run by nature preservation charities such as the State of Nature Partnership and the Woodland and Wildlife Trust. The design includes memorial and ceremonial grounds installed at protected nature sites around the UK. Each site would have to be planned separately according to geography and demand. For this speculation, I've looked at the possibilities that human composting could unlock. Recomposition produces a large amount of rich soil, which means that the remains can be divided into many parts and used in a variety of ways. One can choose to donate it to the trust, take it home, ship it to relatives, scatter it in one or multiple locations, or even buy a tree or potted plant planted in the recomposed soil. My conversation with Lizzie established the precedent that there is no right or wrong way to handle death and grief, and that people must have every available option so that they can choose the ones that fit their needs. Each part of the design can be changed or even skipped, but clients could still combine other parts to best suit them. For instance, one might opt for cremation and a church funeral rather than composting and an on-site ceremony, but still install a marker at the memorial grounds. Each separate part of the service would help charities extend their protective reach, effectively creating a new type of conservation burial. Nature is protected as part of someone's personal legacy on a small scale and the collective heritage on a larger one. This would also allow for people to form a deeper connection with nature, helping them view themselves as an active part in it. Saying things like, "My grandfather is an oak tree," humanizes nature and establishes it as part of us. Although it is all optional, some might still need a monument to memorialize their name. We also need a space to express gestures towards the dead. Physical acts of remembering, like touching a name on a headstone, are tangible ways we let ourselves know that we are taking real action to remember someone, a sort of small personal ritual. While there is not yet a finished design for the space, I created the sketch of what these spaces might feel like. The grounds must be planned in a way that's not disruptive to the environment. It should be visually distinguished from nature to signify an added layer of meaning without imposing on the landscape. When it comes to the markers themselves, the shape should allow for a variety of actions. Emphasis should be on the sensation of touch, so material and surface texture must be taken into consideration. They also need to be durable and stand the test of time. The material might also be reactive to light, heat, and moisture to give a visual response when touched. The markers should also be personalized to represent the person they're commemorating. Inspired by a story told to me by Lizzie about a family that did a DIY funeral, I thought a way to do that might be to have the option of designing and/or making the markers yourself, out of recycled or repurposed materials. This could be a way for the family to come together and let them take control over their situation, while also being sustainable and cost-effective. As a possible direction, I thought of Precious Plastic, a company that provides open-source plans for plastic processing machines and offers guidance on production. A variety of other memorial objects like flower pots, urns, or take-home tree markers could also be made this way. To facilitate rituals, ceremonial pavilion-type structures should be available close to the memorial grounds. These could be used for funerals and memorials, but could also accommodate meditation when not in use. They should be kept open so they can be used freely. It might be necessary for these structures to occasionally be extended to accommodate large ceremonies and closed off to protect against bad weather. Also for shelter and meditation, smaller structures could be installed throughout the area. Focusing on the details in nature gives us an opportunity to pay attention to the things we might normally overlook. It helps us appreciate them by allowing us to see the forest and the trees. From the perspective of mindfulness, focusing on small details and the sensory experience of nature helps ground us and break the cycle of rumination that often comes with complicated, heavy emotions like grief. The intervention in the land should therefore be made to pull focus towards certain views or natural features. But what about the money? The model needs to be financially stable while providing equal service to underprivileged groups. Emphasis should be on clients' needs and well-being. A quote containing a suggested donation amount according to chosen options is presented, but the user may donate as much as they can anonymously. Coupled with existing financing mechanisms, payment for ecosystem services or PES schemes, volunteer work, and a larger number of donations, combined revenue could be able to cover those who need but can't afford the service. PES schemes could be explored as a revenue source because human composting potentially saves the environment from embalming chemicals, air pollution, while also financing preservation and restoration efforts. Inspired by the Buddhist principles of modesty and karma, funeral goers could be encouraged by the family to donate to the charity in the name of the deceased instead of buying flowers. Other possibilities like setting up an annual or monthly donation, volunteering, and DIY options could also make up for part of the expenses. As the amount of people participating in the practice grows, so may the awareness of preservation efforts and the number of small individual donations. So what could this system look like from a client's end? After a family member dies, the family decides to use the charity's services. They explore their options and make a call. They can either deliver the body or have it picked up to be stored until the funeral. They have an informative conversation with a representative to discuss their wishes. After discussing as a family, they contact the charity to make funeral arrangements. They don't need to decide on what to do with the remains or if they want a memorial marker yet, because the recomposition process takes 30 days, giving them plenty of time to decide what they want to do, and if needed, they can make the decision well after picking up the remains. They decide to hold the ceremony in the site's ceremonial pavilion. They notify the extended family to let them know of the arrangements. After the funeral, they make a marker for the memorial ground. They're able to choose the colors and textures they think best represent their loved one. If they had opted for cremation, they could have also made an urn at the trust making facilities. They decide to buy a plant from the trust, plant it in the recomposed soil, and make the planter themselves. They request that part of the soil be shipped to everyone who wanted some and take their plant and the rest of the soil home. Some of the relatives also buy a tree from the trust and plant it in their gardens, and part of the family decides to install another marker closer to their home. They receive a quote from the trust with a suggested donation amount for each of the services they used. They decide to pay what they can at once and the rest through an annual donation plan. As time passes, several trees grow from the loved one's soil. The grieving friends and family visit the memorial grounds and walk through the surrounding woodland. Some have joined grief walking groups organized by End of Life Doula, where they found support amongst new friends. Every time someone visits the memorial grounds, they are also spending time in nature, which on its own has physical and mental health benefits. They use the space to rest and meditate, and every visit slowly helps them grow. After a few years, they throw a lively memorial at the pavilion for the lost family member, where they laugh, cry, dance, and tell stories. Those remembering their loved ones in this context intrinsically think of nature, the circle of life, and their place in it. As the charity's reach expands through the service, caring about and protecting nature become part of a shared heritage. Grief and growth introduces something that's currently missing from death practices: perspective and options. Thank you for watching.